The unlikely meeting. In a bustling city where tradition clashed with modernity, two souls from entirely different worlds crossed paths in the most unexpected way. Aman, a hard-working young man from a middle-class background, believed in dreams, but had learned to live within his means. He worked as a journalist, uncovering stories that mattered, but his own life remained predictable, bound by the expectations of family and duty. On the other hand, Zara belonged to a world of wealth and privilege. The daughter of a powerful businessman, she was raised in an environment where appearances mattered more than emotions. She was beautiful, intelligent, and seemingly had everything, except the freedom to make her own choices. Her life had always been carefully mapped out by her parents, from the prestigious university she attended to the man they had chosen for her to marry. One rainy evening, fate intervened. Aman was covering a protest against corporate corruption when chaos broke out. Police arrived, tear gas filled the air, and people ran in all directions. In the midst of the confusion, he saw her, Zara, struggling to find her way through the panicked crowd. Dressed in an elegant outfit, she stood out among the protesters, her terrified eyes searching for an escape. Without thinking, Aman grabbed her hand and led her to safety, shielding her from the chaos. They found shelter in a quiet bookstore nearby, catching their breath as the sound of sirens echoed outside. "Are you okay?" Aman asked, noticing her trembling hands. Zara nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude and curiosity. She had never met someone like him before, someone who wasn't afraid to defy authority, someone who spoke with passion about justice rather than wealth. "You shouldn't have been there," he said, half joking. "Protests and high heels don't mix well." Zara let out a small laugh. "I wasn't supposed to be there. I wanted to see the real world for once." That night they talked for hours. Aman spoke of his struggles, his dreams of a fairer world, and his love for storytelling. Zara, in turn, opened up about the suffocating life she led, the expectations that weighed her down, and the loneliness of being surrounded by people who never truly understood her. As they parted ways, an unspoken connection lingered between them. It was more than gratitude or curiosity. It was the beginning of something neither of them had planned for. Over the next few weeks, they kept finding excuses to meet. Coffee shops, late-night phone calls, stolen moments in hidden corners of the city, each interaction deepened their bond. But they both knew the reality of their worlds. Zara's family would never accept a man like Aman, and Aman couldn't afford to dream of a love that was out of his reach. Yet, against all logic, love had found them, and no matter how cruel the world was, neither of them was ready to let go. A forbidden romance. Zara and Aman knew their love was dangerous. It was the kind of love whispered about in hushed tones, the kind that could shatter lives if discovered. But the more they tried to resist, the stronger their feelings became. They were from different worlds, she, the daughter of a powerful businessman, and he, a struggling journalist with nothing to his name but his dreams. Their stolen moments were all they had. Late at night, when the city quieted and the world wasn't watching, they would meet in the dimly lit corner of a small bookstore or a quiet cafe where no one knew them. Each meeting was a risk, but neither could bear to stay apart. Zara's family had already chosen a husband for her, a wealthy businessman's son, someone who matched their status. She had met him once, a man who saw her as nothing more than an asset in a business deal. Her heart rebelled at the thought of a life without love, a life dictated by others. Aman, too, understood the consequences of their love. His mother had warned him to stay away from people like Zara, reminding him that love was not enough to bridge the gap between wealth and struggle. "The world isn't kind to people like us," she had said. But Aman didn't care. Every time he saw Zara, he felt alive in a way he never had before. One evening, as they walked along a quiet bridge, Zara turned to him, her eyes filled with both fear and hope. "What if they find out?" she whispered. Aman took her hand, holding it tightly. "Then we fight," he said. "No matter what happens, I won't let them take you away from me." But the world was cruel. Suspicion grew. Whispers reached her father's ears. One night, Zara was locked inside her home, her phone taken away. She was told that her engagement would be announced the next week. Desperation gripped Aman. He sent messages that went unanswered, waited outside her house in the shadows, hoping for a glimpse of her. And then, one night, she appeared, on the balcony, her face streaked with tears. With shaking hands, she dropped a note. Aman rushed forward, catching it. The words were simple, but enough to break his heart. "They're sending me away." "I love you." The walls were closing in. Time was running out. They had only one choice left, to risk everything for their love. The secret vows. Zara and Amayan had no choice but to defy the world. Their love had survived in the shadows for too long, hidden from prying eyes and cruel expectations. But now, with her engagement looming and her family tightening their grip, they knew there was only one way to stay together. They had to marry in secret. Late one night, Zara managed to slip away from her guarded home. With only the stars as witnesses, she met Aman outside the old bookstore where their love story had begun. His hands trembled as he held hers, not from fear, but from the weight of the decision they were about to make. "I don't care what happens after this," Zara whispered, her voice shaking. "As long as I'm yours." Aman cupped her face gently, searching her eyes for any sign of hesitation. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Once we do this, there's no turning back." Zara nodded. "I have never been more sure of anything in my life." That night, in the presence of only a trusted friend and an old cleric who understood the power of love over tradition, Zara and Aman exchanged vows. There were no lavish decorations, no grand celebrations, just the promise of two hearts willing to fight for each other. With trembling hands, Aman placed a simple ring on Zara's finger, his voice steady as he spoke. "No matter what the world does to keep us apart, I will always choose you." Tears welled in Zara's eyes as she repeated the promise, sealing their love with a vow stronger than any family expectation or societal rule. But the world would not let them be happy so easily. The morning after their secret union, Zara was nowhere to be found. Aman's calls went unanswered. When he rushed to her home, all he saw were guards at the gate, their cold eyes warning him to stay away. Inside, Zara's father stood before her, his face dark with fury. "You thought you could shame this family and walk away?" he spat. "You will forget that, boy, or you will never leave this house again." But Zara was no longer just his daughter. She was Aman's wife, and no matter what it took, she would find her way back to him. Outside, Aman clenched his fists, his heart pounding. He had sworn to stand by her against all odds, and now he would have to prove it. Because love was worth fighting for, even in a cruel world. The cruel world strikes. For a few stolen days, Zara and Aman lived in the illusion that love alone could protect them. Bound by their secret vows, they dreamed of a future where they could love openly, without fear. But the world was merciless, and soon it struck back with full force. Zara's father had discovered the truth. The news of her secret marriage spread like wildfire within their circles, whispered in disgust and outrage. For her family, it was not just betrayal, it was humiliation. Aman, a man with no wealth, no status, had dared to claim what was meant for someone of their own kind. One night, Zara was forcibly taken from her home, locked in a remote estate far from the city. She fought, screamed, pleaded, but her father's decision was final. "You have shamed us," he said coldly. "You will never see that boy again." Meanwhile, Aman searched for her relentlessly, but every door he knocked on was slammed in his face. He was threatened, beaten by men sent to warn him to forget her. "You're nothing," one of them sneered. "You really thought she would choose a life of struggle over a life of luxury?" But Aman knew Zara. He knew her love was real. Even as he nursed his wounds, he refused to give up. He reached out to old friends, searched for clues, did everything in his power to find her. Days turned into weeks. Then, one evening, a message arrived. A single slip of paper smuggled to him by a kind-hearted maid. "They are forcing me to sign the annulment papers. I will never stop loving you. Rage and desperation filled Aman's heart. He had sworn to stand by her against all odds, and now he had to fight harder than ever. Zara, locked away, clung to one truth. Aman would come for her. Even in a world so cruel, love had to find a way. And if it didn't, then she would find a way to him. A web of lies. Zara and Aman had thought their secret marriage would be their greatest act of defiance, but they soon realized that keeping it hidden was an even greater battle. Every day was a delicate balancing act, weaving lies to protect their love while living in fear of being exposed. Zara returned home, pretending nothing had changed. She endured the suffocating expectations of her family, attending social events, entertaining suitors, all while secretly carrying Aman's ring on a chain around her neck. Every time her mother questioned her distant behavior, every time her father scrutinized her actions, she forced a smile and played her role. Aman, too, was walking a dangerous path. His colleagues at the newspaper began noticing his distracted mind, his sudden disappearances. His mother questioned why he seemed so lost in thought, why his nights were no longer spent at home. He gave half-truths, dodged questions, and prayed that no one would dig too deep. But secrets have a way of unraveling. One evening, Zara's cousin, Alina, caught her sneaking out. She followed her through the quiet streets, watched as she met Aman in a secluded cafe, and saw the way they held hands like two souls who belonged to each other. "You're married to him, aren't you?" Alina confronted Zara later that night, her voice filled with shock and betrayal. "Do you have any idea what will happen if the family finds out?" Zara begged her to keep quiet, but fear and loyalty to the family ran deep. The next day, whispers began spreading. Zara's mother watched her more closely. Her father's mood darkened. The walls were closing in. And then came the betrayal neither of them had expected. Aman's best friend, Saad, someone he had trusted with everything, gave in to pressure from Zara's family. Whether it was fear, bribery, or a misguided sense of duty, Saad revealed the truth. Zara and Aman were already married. That night, Aman was ambushed. Men sent by Zara's father dragged him into a dark alley, their fists silencing any protest. "Stay away from her," one of them growled. "You don't deserve her." Meanwhile, Zara was confronted by her father in their grand home, his fury like a storm waiting to destroy everything in its path. "You will sign the annulment papers," he declared. "This mistake ends tonight." Zara stood frozen, her heart pounding. The web of lies had finally collapsed, and now she had only two choices: submit to her family's will or risk everything to fight for her love. The pain of separation. Zara clutched the annulment papers in trembling hands, her father's voice echoing in her ears. "Sign it, and this nightmare ends." The weight of his command pressed down on her, but the real pain came from knowing that somewhere, Aman was suffering just as much, if not more. After the brutal beating, Aman had disappeared. His phone was off, his home was empty, and no one knew where he had gone. Zara's father had ensured that he was silenced, erased from her life as if he had never existed. For days, Zara refused to believe it was over. She searched for him in the places they used to meet, hoping he would find a way to reach her. But time passed, and the world remained silent. Had he given up? Had the cruel reality of their situation finally broken him? On the other side of the city, Aman lay in a small rented room, recovering from his injuries. His ribs ached, his face was bruised, but none of it hurt as much as the thought of losing Zara. He had risked everything for her, and now she was trapped in a gilded cage he couldn't reach. Saad, his former best friend, came to see him one evening. "It's over," he said quietly. "They're making her sign the annulment papers. Let her go, Aman. You can't win against them." Aman's fists clenched, but deep down, he knew the truth. Love alone wasn't enough, not in a world that thrived on power and control. What future could he offer Zara if every step they took was met with resistance? Zara, too, felt her strength wavering. Night after night, she stared at the papers, waiting for a miracle. But miracles didn't happen in a world like hers. One evening, her mother came into her room, her expression softer than usual. "I know you love him," she said, surprising Zara. "But love isn't always enough. Sometimes letting go is the greatest act of love." Tears streamed down Zara's face as she picked up the pen. Every stroke of ink felt like carving out a piece of her soul. And when it was done, she felt hollow, like something inside her had died. Aman received the news days later. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He simply walked to the old bookstore where they had first met, sat in the corner where they had once laughed together, and let the silence consume him. They had fought for love, but in the end, the world had won. Or so it seemed, because even though they were apart, even though fate had torn them away from each other, their hearts still belonged to one another. A ray of hope days turned into weeks, and Zara and Aman lived like shadows of their former selves. She was trapped in a life she no longer recognized, while he wandered through the city like a man who had lost his purpose. They had fought, they had loved, and they had lost. Or so they thought. Hope came in the most unexpected way. Alina, Zara's cousin, the same cousin who had nearly exposed their secret, appeared at Aman's doorstep one evening. He barely recognized her in the dim light, but her eyes held a strange intensity. "I was wrong," she admitted, her voice filled with regret. "I thought I was protecting Zara by telling the family, but I see it now. She's miserable without you, and I can't watch her suffer anymore." Aman's heart pounded. "Where is she?" "They're sending her away," Alina said. "Tomorrow, a flight to London. Once she's there, you'll never see her again." The words sent a shock through Aman's system. He had told himself that love wasn't enough, that maybe Zara was better off without him. But this wasn't just about love anymore. This was about fate, about fighting for the one person who made life worth living. Alina handed him an address. "Be there by midnight. I'll get her to you. But after that, you're on your own." That night, Zara sat in her room, staring at the suitcase her mother had packed. London. A life without Aman. A life where she would be expected to forget him. A knock at the window startled her. She turned sharply, and her heart nearly stopped. Aman. Tears filled her eyes as she rushed to open it. "You're here," she whispered, barely believing it. "I never left," he said, "and I never will." Behind him, Alina stood watch, keeping an eye out for the guards. "You two need to leave. Now." Zara hesitated only for a second. Then, she grabbed his hand, letting herself be pulled into the night. As they ran through the dark streets, the weight of the world lifted from their shoulders. They had spent too long trapped by fear, too long letting others decide their fate. But tonight, with the city lights shining above them and the wind in their hair, they were free. They didn't know what the future held. They didn't know if the world would still try to tear them apart. But for the first time in a long time, they had hope. The ultimate sacrifice. For the first time in months, Zara and Aman had hope. They had escaped into the night, running from a world that had done everything to keep them apart. But deep down, Aman knew the truth. Happiness built on borrowed time never lasted. They hid in a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, waiting for a chance to disappear completely. Alina helped as much as she could, sneaking food, bringing news, and reassuring them that no one had found them yet. But the net was closing in. Then one evening, Aman overheard a conversation that changed everything. He was outside, waiting for Alina, when he saw two men in expensive suits questioning a shopkeeper down the street. "Have you seen this girl?" one of them asked, showing Zara's picture. "Her family is offering a reward, and if you're hiding anything, we'll find out." Aman's blood ran cold. They were close. Too close. If they were caught, Zara wouldn't just be sent away. She would be locked in a world she could never escape from. And Aman? He knew men like these. They wouldn't let him walk away alive. That night, as Zara slept beside him, Aman made the hardest decision of his life. Before dawn, he left a note on the table, kissed her forehead one last time, and walked away. By the time Zara woke up, he was gone. Her hands shook as she unfolded the letter. My love, you are my whole world, but I cannot be selfish anymore. If we stay together, they will never stop hunting us. They will never let you live in peace. I would rather live knowing you are safe than watch them destroy you just to punish me. Go with Alina. Leave this place. Start over. Be happy. That is all I have ever wanted for you. Please don't look for me. I will love you forever. Tears blurred Zara's vision as she clutched the letter to her chest. No, she whispered, shaking her head. No, Aman. But he was already gone. Far away, Aman stood on an empty road, waiting. When the black car pulled up, he didn't run. He didn't fight. The men stepped out, their faces cold. Smart choice, one of them said. You finally understand where you belong. Aman only had one request. Leave her alone. The man smirked. That depends. How much are you willing to give? Aman took a deep breath. Everything. And so, he paid the price. Zara escaped that night. With Alina's help, she boarded a flight out of the country, her heart shattered, her soul aching. She had lost the love of her life, but she had also gained her freedom. Aman had given up his happiness to protect her, and that was the cruelest, purest kind of love there was. Truth revealed. Months passed. Zara lived in another country, free from the walls that had once imprisoned her. But she was far from free. Every night, she dreamed of Aman. Every morning, she woke up with the weight of his sacrifice crushing her. She didn't know where he was. She didn't know if he was even alive. But fate had a way of unraveling the past. One evening, as she scrolled through news from home, her heart stopped. Aman's name, his picture, a headline that sent a chill through her veins. Journalist exposes corruption, goes missing after confronting powerful family. Zara's hands trembled as she clicked the article. Aman hadn't disappeared quietly. He had fought back. He had uncovered the dark secrets of her family, the bribery, the illegal dealings, the truth they had buried for years. And before he vanished, he had sent everything to the press. Her father's empire was crumbling. The scandal spread like wildfire. Reporters camped outside her family's home. Powerful allies turned their backs on them. And in the chaos, the biggest truth of all was exposed. Zara and Aman's secret marriage. It was no longer a whisper behind closed doors. The world knew now. Everyone knew. And there was nothing her family could do to erase it. But where was Aman? Zara couldn't stay silent anymore. She returned home, not as the obedient daughter they had once controlled, but as a woman who had lost everything except the truth. I want to see him, she demanded. Where is he? Her father, once so powerful, now looked like a man undone. You still care about him? He scoffed. Even after everything he did? Zara's voice didn't waver. I will always care about him. Then came the truth, the final, devastating truth. Aman had been taken, held captive, silenced. But the world was watching now. With the media hounding her family, they couldn't keep him hidden much longer. And so, after months of separation, after lies, betrayal, and sacrifice, Aman was set free. The day Zara saw him again, he was thinner, bruised, but his eyes still burned with the same fire. She ran to him, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she was home. The world had tried to break them, society had tried to bury them, but love, true love, had survived, and in the end, that was all that mattered. Love prevails or fate decides. Zara and Aman stood before each other, broken but unyielding. After everything, lies, betrayal, separation, and sacrifice, they had found their way back. But their story was not over yet. The world had seen the truth. Zara's family was disgraced, their power shattered by the very man they had tried to erase. Aman had won the battle, but at what cost? As he looked into Zara's tear-filled eyes, he asked the question that had haunted him for months. Is it over? She shook her head. It will never be over. Not until we decide how this story ends. Two possible endings. 1. Love prevails, a hopeful ending. With her family's influence destroyed, Zara was finally free. For the first time, there was no one to dictate her future, no chains to hold her back. Hand in hand, she and Aman walked away from the ruins of their past, ready to build a life where love wasn't a secret, where they no longer had to run. Their journey had been painful, but in the end, love had conquered all. They married again, not in hiding, not in fear, but in the open, in front of those who truly cared for them. And as they exchanged vows under a sky that had once seemed so cruel, they knew, this time, nothing would take them apart. 2. Fate decides. A bittersweet tragedy. But some stories don't get a happy ending. Aman had fought too hard, angered too many powerful enemies. Even as the world celebrated his courage, danger still lurked in the shadows. One evening, as he waited for Zara outside the old bookstore where their love had begun, a car sped past, a single gunshot piercing the silence. By the time Zara reached him, Aman lay in her arms, blood staining his shirt. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I wanted more time." Zara sobbed, holding him close. "No, Aman, we were supposed to have forever." He smiled weakly. "We did." As the light faded from his eyes, Zara felt the cruel truth settle in. The world had won. Fate had decided. But as she looked up at the night sky, she knew one thing for certain. Their love had been real. It had been worth it. And as long as she lived, she would carry his love with her, a flame that no cruelty could ever extinguish. No matter the ending. Whether love triumphed or fate had the final say, one truth remained. Zara and Aman's love was never in vain. It had defied the odds, shaken the foundations of power, and burned brighter than the cruel world that had tried to destroy it. And that was a love worth remembering.